Ethan Hale stepped through the glass doors of his downtown office tower and felt the cold hit him like a wall. Snow was falling thick and fast, already covering the sidewalks in a soft white blanket that muffled the usual city noise. He pulled his coat tighter and glanced at his watch. Nearly 8 in the evening. Another long day. Another round of meetings that bled into each other until the hours disappeared. He was about to head toward the parking garage when he noticed her. A small figure standing on the corner, just beyond the glow of the streetlight. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a thin jacket that looked 2 sizes too big. She had her arms wrapped around herself, and her breath came out in small clouds. She wasn't moving, just standing there, staring down the empty street like she was waiting for something that wasn't coming. Ethan slowed his steps. People passed her without looking. A couple hurried by, huddled under an umbrella. A delivery driver jogged toward a van. No one stopped. No one even seemed to see her. He felt something tighten in his chest. He told himself it wasn't his business. Someone was probably coming for her. A parent, a neighbor. But the snow kept falling, and the girl didn't move, and Ethan found himself walking toward her instead of away. "Hey," he said gently, crouching down so he was closer to her height. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up at him with wide brown eyes. Her cheeks were red from the cold, and there was a smudge of something, maybe dirt or dried tears, on her chin. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I'm waiting for my sister," she said quietly. "She didn't come home." Ethan glanced around. The street was nearly empty now. "Where do you live? Is it close?" She nodded and pointed down the block. "Over there, the brown building." "Does your sister usually come home by now?" The girl nodded again, her voice barely above a whisper. "She works at the diner on 5th Street. She always comes home before it gets dark. But she didn't, and I don't know what to do." Ethan's stomach dropped. He thought of all the things that could happen to a kid standing alone in the snow. All the people who might not have good intentions. All the ways a night like this could go wrong. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nina." "Okay, Nina. I'm Ethan. How about we go to your apartment and try to call your sister from there? We can figure this out together." Nina studied him for a moment, and Ethan could see the fear and uncertainty in her eyes. But she was also cold and scared and alone, and eventually she nodded. They walked down the block together, Nina leading the way to a narrow building with peeling paint and a door that didn't quite close all the way. She pulled a key from her pocket and unlocked the door to a first-floor apartment. Inside, it was small but clean. There was a couch covered with a knitted blanket, a table with 2 chairs, and a shelf lined with library books. The kitchen was tiny, but the counters were spotless. Everything about the place said that someone cared, even if there wasn't much to work with. "Does your sister have a phone?" Ethan asked. Nina shook her head. "It broke last month. She said we'd get a new one when she got paid." Ethan felt that tightness in his chest again. He looked around the apartment and saw a calendar on the wall with shifts written in careful handwriting. Bills stacked neatly on the counter. A drawing taped to the fridge that said, "I love you, Mira," in crayon. "What's your sister's name?" he asked. Mira Reyes." Ethan pulled out his phone and started searching. He called the diner on 5th Street first. A tired voice answered, and when Ethan asked about Mira, the man on the other end sighed. "She left hours ago. Said she wasn't feeling good. Told her go home and rest." Ethan's pulse quickened. If Mira left hours ago and never made it home, something was wrong. He thanked the man and hung up, then started calling hospitals. Nina sat on the couch, watching him with those wide, worried eyes. On the 3rd call, he got an answer. A nurse at City General confirmed they had a Mira Reyes in the emergency room. She'd collapsed on the subway platform and been brought in unconscious. She was stable now, but they were keeping her for observation. Ethan exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Nina, your sister's at the hospital. She's okay, but we need to go see her." Nina's face crumpled, and for the first time, tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan knelt beside her and put a hand on her shoulder. "She's going to be fine," he said softly. "I promise. Let's go." He drove them through the snowy streets. Nina silent in the passenger seat, clutching the seatbelt like it was the only thing keeping her together. At the hospital, Ethan talked to the front desk, explained the situation, and after a few minutes, a nurse led them back to a curtained area in the emergency room. Mira was lying in a narrow bed, and in her arm in dark circles under her eyes. She looked young, maybe 23 or 24, with the same brown eyes as her sister. When she saw Nina, her face went pale, and then she started to cry. "Nina!" she gasped, reaching out. "Oh my God, Nina, I'm so sorry." Nina ran to her and climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed, wrapping her arms around Myra's neck. Mira held her tight, sobbing into her hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Ethan stood back, giving them space. A doctor appeared beside him, a woman with gray streaks in her hair and kind eyes. She glanced at the sisters, then at Ethan. "Are you family?" she asked. "No," Ethan said. "I found Nina waiting outside in the snow. She didn't know where her sister was." The doctor nodded slowly. Mira collapsed from exhaustion and severe anemia. She's been running herself into the ground. When we asked about her medical history, she told us she's been working 3 jobs to take care of her sister. Their parents died 2 years ago in a car accident. It's just the 2 of them. Ethan felt something crack open inside him. He thought of all the times he'd walked past people without really seeing them. All the hours he'd spent in boardrooms talking about growth and profit margins, while people like Mira worked themselves to the breaking point just to survive. He looked at the 2 sisters, still holding each other like they were the only solid thing in the world. Mira was whispering something to Nina, and Nina was nodding, her small hands gripping her sister's hospital gown. Ethan stepped closer. "Mira," he said gently. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse. "Thank you for bringing her here. I don't know what I would have done if—" Her voice broke, and she couldn't finish. "You don't have to thank me," Ethan said, "but you do need to let people help you." Mira shook her head. "We don't have anyone. It's just us." "Not anymore," Ethan said. Over the next few hours, Ethan made calls. He arranged for Mira to stay in the hospital for a few days so she could rest and get the treatment she needed. He found a friend who ran a family services nonprofit and got Nina connected with a temporary care program that would make sure she was looked after while her sister recovered. He paid the hospital bill without telling Mira, knowing she refused as she knew. But more than that, he listened. He sat in that sterile hospital room and heard Myra's story. How she dropped out of college to take care of Nina. How she worked as a waitress, a cleaner, and a night stock clerk just to keep the rent paid and food on the table. How she was terrified every single day that she wasn't enough, that she'd fail Nina the way she felt the world had failed them both. "I just want her to have a chance," Mira said quietly, looking down at Nina, who had fallen asleep against her side. "I don't care what happens to me. I just want her to be okay." Ethan thought about his own life. The penthouse apartment he barely spent time in. The bank account that grew while he slept. The deals and investments that felt important in the moment, but meant nothing when he went home to an empty space. "You're doing more than okay," he told Mira. "You're doing something most people couldn't. But you can't do it alone. And you don't have to." Before he left that night, Ethan made a decision. He'd spent years building his company, chasing success, proving something to people who didn't matter. But standing in that hospital room, watching a young woman hold her sister like she was the most precious thing in the world, Ethan realized what he'd been missing. Over the next few months, Ethan launched a foundation. It started small, helping families like Mira and Nina with rent assistance, medical bills, childcare. But it grew. He partnered with schools and hospitals and community centers. He hired people who understood what it meant to struggle, who knew that sometimes the difference between falling apart and holding on was just one person who cared enough to stop and ask if you were okay. He stayed in touch with Mira and Nina. He helped Mira get back on her feet, connected her with job training programs, made sure Nina had what she needed for school. He didn't do it for recognition or praise. He did it because that night in the snow had changed something in him. It reminded him that the world was full of people just trying to survive, and that sometimes all it took was one person to notice. One evening, Almost a year later, Ethan stood outside that same office tower where he'd first seen Nina. Snow was falling again, soft and quiet. He thought about how easy it would have been to walk past her that night, how close he'd come to not stopping. He thought about all the people he'd walked past before, all the moments he'd missed because he was too busy or too focused on his own life to see what was right in front of him. Mira and Nina had given him something he didn't know he'd lost, a sense of purpose, a reminder that the best parts of being human had nothing to do with money or success. It was about showing up, about seeing people, about caring enough to stop when someone needed help. Ethan pulled his coat tighter and smiled. The snow kept falling, soft and steady, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.